Hello, and thank you so much for sharing your time, energy, attention, and your love of the increase in your life with me here again today on the Light Your Life podcast. I love the topic that we're going to be diving in today, and our guest is an expert at this. And it's turning on our brain's hidden powers. So, yes, we all have hidden powers. We know this. We go to movies, we watch the Avengers, and we come out thinking, oh, I could surmount everything because there's something true to that inside of ourselves. Maybe we just don't know how to tap into it and how to utilize that and resource it into our everyday life. Well, today, with our wonderful guest, Dr. Eugene Choi, we'll get to understand more about this. I know I'm listening. I'm going to be taking notes too. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Eugene. He left behind a successful career as a healthcare professional to dedicate his life to show heart-driven entrepreneurs and professionals like you and I how to fully unlock their own potential using neuroscience and technology. I am so looking forward to this because I'm a geek at heart and I want to learn. Whenever I see the word technology, I'm like, oh, show me more. I want to know. I want to know. So you're going to be taking away some wonderful bullets today, those tokens, those nuggets of how you can up and amp up your own hidden power. So Dr. Eugene Choi, thank you so much for being our guest today here on Light Your Life.
Yeah, I am so honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful. I ask everybody a bit of the same question at the very beginning, and it's what brought you to the doorstep of what your passion is now, to this understanding of neuroscience?
Yeah, the way I sum it up is I think everyone has that like crisis moment in their life, right? Where they get jaded, they do everything they thought they were supposed to do, and they realize, is this it? That for me was growing up really poor. I thought money was a thing I needed to get. And when I got it, after graduating as a pharmacist, getting a six-figure salary right out of college, sitting there going, is this it? I remember getting my first paycheck. And this is the life of six figures. And I had everything that I thought I wanted. I had the nice new sports car. I had the brand new apartment I was living in New York City, right? And all that good stuff. Yet there was this gnawing sense of a lack of fulfillment in my life. The trust issues were still there, the fear was still there, if I was being honest with myself. So that led me to this moment where I needed to figure this out. Like, what is it? Like, what is the secret to fulfillment? You hear about it all the time in personal development content and all that good stuff. And frankly, I was tired of getting temporarily inspired, right? You hear the
Hmm.
motivational speaker, you come
Right?
home once the adrenaline's gone, right? And then you just go back to your own patterns. So I really wanted to figure this out. So long story short, it led down this path of years of, I went into filmmaking for a little bit,
Hmm.
thinking maybe I wanted to create films because I was dabbling in films and I was making fun videos for friends' weddings and all that. And it got the attention of this group, Jubilee Media. And these three Asian Americans left behind even more prestigious careers than me. One was the youngest director at the White House at the time, right? One
Oh,
of the youngest, the other guy was a Wharton grad, right? Top business school, left behind consulting gig at Bain, which is one of the top consulting firms. And the third guy was a Harvard med student. So here they are inviting me, hey, you want to create some videos on YouTube together and tell inspiring stories? I'm like, what excuse do I have when you're leaving behind these careers that any Asian parent would be like, are you freaking crazy?
right.
So I talked to my wife one night. I was just like, what do you think about trying this thing? Because it's this journey of trying to find your passion, find your purpose. And she said yes. She was crazy enough to say yes, let's try this out. So we moved out to LA from New York City, packed up everything, left behind our whole life in New York City. And very quickly after a year or so realized I do not like filmmaking. To give you an idea, while we had a lot of success, one of the biggest videos I worked on got 23 million views online. It took me 7 months to edit it. So I'm sitting there going,
Whoa.
well, I don't like the act of filmmaking because it's very labor intensive. Well, why did I like this to begin with? And I'm realizing, oh, every movie, every film, it's a story. I like the storytelling aspect. And why do we love stories? Why do we as adults love to sit in a dark room at a theater and essentially be told a story? It's because it's a story about amazing transformation that a personal individual will go through. You have a main character going through a challenge, they go through an amazing transformation, and now they come back home and they're different for the better. They've changed for the better. That's when I started getting curious. How do I make this happen in real life? So that's when my healthcare um, background came full circle. That's when I discovered neuroscience. I'm like, oh my God, if people just understand the basics of how the brain works and how it keeps you stuck, how it keeps you self-sabotaging, how it keeps you anxious, they can actually develop the skills to tap into their superpowers, right? The hidden powers that their brain has, your creativity, your intuition, your critical thinking skills, your problem solving skills. And once I learned this, because I had some marketing skill by then that I've learned from filmmaking, right? That had multiple viral videos. I learned how to package all of this complicated stuff into an easy way to digest it so that it's also easy to implement. And that's what I've been doing since, just showing leaders how to do it, how to implement it. And there's technology that helps show, how your brain's working and all that. I use that as well.
Wonderful. How old is the neuroscience industry or this understanding of the brain?
It's really young. It's we know more about the brain than we ever did before 20 years ago. So there's a lot of exciting new research evidence that's come up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's relatively young, right? I mean, yeah, we're not born with a manual on how to use the brain, right?
No, none of us.
Yeah. But the exciting part is there's a lot more research now that shows a lot more data that's really promising.
I love that. So, what have been some of the more noteworthy or memorable transformations that you've personally witnessed and helped people with?
Yeah, everything came down to me having this big aha moment about this one single truth, which is that your brain at any given time is in one of two states, and that's it.
Okay,
It can only be in one or the other.
that's easy. I can count to two.
Exactly. You're either in what's called a survival state or what I call an executive state. The survival state is the part that prevents you from accessing all of the amazing capabilities of your brain, such as critical thinking skills, creativity, intuition, all that stuff. And the purpose of this is meant for life-threatening scenarios, right? It's for survival, meaning if there's a tiger in front of you about to eat you, you need this part of your brain, which is a part of your brain that reacts without thinking. Keyword
Right.
being you're not thinking. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Right? So it's a reaction without
Automatic.
thinking. It's automatic.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a reaction. And this part prevents you from accessing those parts of your brain. And then the other state that you can be in, which is called an executive state, this is where all the amazing things can kick in: your critical thinking skills, your emotional regulation, your creativity.
Mhm.
But that's what I realized was, oh, okay, you're only in these two states. But what was shocking was, based on research, for at least around more or less 70% of our adult lives,
Mm.
research shows you're in the survival state. So you're
Ouch.
cut off from the amazing parts of yourself, not because your life's actually in danger, right? Not because there's a tiger in front of you about to eat you, but because we're surviving from feelings we don't like feeling. So if you just ask yourself, how often do you feel stressed? How often do you feel upset, frustrated, sad, anxious? That already triggers your brain to go into survival.
Ah. And aren't we in a culture where those, what you said, those stressful emotions are pretty much the normal?
Right. We feel like there's threats all around us, because when your brain feels like it's threatened, guess what? It
Mhm.
triggers survival state and you're reacting without thinking now. So if you examine all of the things that feel like threats for us, right? Modern day survival is money, right? Money tends to
Mhm.
trigger a lot of survival state in people. Other triggers, if you look at the news, right? At
Yeah.
least here in
The
America,
media. That's the first
right?
thing I thought about whenever you were going down that litany of emotions. I was thinking, oh my God, that's just
Yeah.
turning on the news.
Think about how you feel. What are the things that people do on media now? Is what? Shootings, dramatic politics, pandemic, of course, obviously,
Yeah.
right? And all that kind of stuff. It just triggers a lot of fear. And when you're in fear, your brain goes into survival, and now you're cutting off your superpowers, which a big one for me is empathy.
Mm.
Your empathy is turned off when you're in survival state, literally, like the part of your brain that can think about someone else. Because if a tiger's in front of you about to eat you, you're not sitting there going, I wonder how this tiger's doing. Are you eating okay? Are your parents treating you all right? We don't do that.
No.
So that's kind of what I realized. It's culture, it's media, right? Or the pressure we experience at work or from our
Right.
parents growing up, whatever that may be. There's so many things that our brain might perceive as a threat, which is why a majority of our life we're in this mode where we're reacting without thinking. And that's the very thing that keeps us stuck, is that
Yes.
survival.
And so, for the people that you serve and you work with, in fact, I want to take a moment to mention how people can reach you. Dr. Eugene Choi is reachable through destinyhacks.co. And pretty easy. We can all spell these words. www.destinyhacks.co, where you have a wonderful bonus for us. You have a gift for us. and a free training that you've created on how to activate our own brain superpowers.
Yes.
Thank you for doing that. And you have your own podcast as well, neurohackingpodcast.com, which I've now favorited on my podcast app.
Thank you. That
Thank
means a
you.
lot.
It's awesome. And so when people arrive at your doorstep of intelligence and knowing, what are they dealing with in life? You've talked about stress. I know you work with entrepreneurs and business owners. What are some of those things that you see as the before state of the clients you work with before you help them through understanding their brain?
Yeah, absolutely. The before state, it's a lot of stress, right? Overwhelm, fear. And it's this experience. One of the things that tend to happen is, a lot of my clients were basically in similar scenarios that I've went through. They've achieved what they thought success looked like. They have whether it's having the multi-million-dollar business, the nice house that they built from scratch or whatever, they have all of that, yet why is it that I still don't feel good? Weren't these the things that I needed to feel better? And they're starting to finally get awareness that maybe what I thought was going to help me feel better isn't the thing, because I've been trying my whole life. Because I have some clients that are in their 60s and they're sitting there going, oh my gosh, like, why am I still feeling this way? So once we understand how the brain works and how it operates, right, that's when they start realizing things about themselves they didn't realize, where the actual problem was coming from, where the actual feelings were coming from. And then I bring them through the process of training and understanding how to handle it, right? And once they do that, it just
Beautiful.
feels a lot better. It's this experience of what you thought was real.
Mhm.
You realize it's not real, and then you find out what's actually real, which is always empowering and freeing and liberating, right? Like, it's kind of like that experience you have if you watch the movie, you thought the bad guy was the bad guy and turned out to be the good guy. Like, you can't
Right.
see yourself the same again because you can't unsee it anymore.
Beautiful. So it can actually change your history, because it feels as though, or sounds like, your memory of what those things were can actually transform now that you're perceiving it from that executive brain.
Exactly. When you're in your executive state, you can see the whole picture, because your survival state, your brain actually develops tunnel vision. You see what I'm saying? Like, if a tiger's in
Yeah.
front of you about to eat you, you're not sitting there going, let me examine my surroundings. No, you're tunnel vision, focused on the threat. When in life, you have so many opportunities and solutions around you, but if you're in survival, you literally can't see them. Your brain can't see them because it's
And it
just
makes
in that
sense. I
tunnel
mean,
vision.
it's built that way, right?
Yeah. And you know how many leaders operate from that?
Yeah,
And
that's
they're not,
painful.
and how much does that impact the rest of the organization? It hurts the
Mhm.
organization because they're not seeing the whole picture, because they're survival.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm curious, do you, maybe in your studies, you know this, as you were sharing, I was wondering, when the memories are implanted in our mind, if we were in the survival or that,
Mhm.
the reptilian brain or that painful state, I forget, what did you call it? Not the executive brain,
The survival brain.
the survival brain.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Not wanting to even talk about it, so I couldn't remember what it was. But if we're creating our experiences from the survival brain,
Yes.
when we're in the future and we've worked with Dr. Eugene and we get to the executive brain, do those memories now not have as much stress related to them, or do we
Correct.
change them, or are they actually a different picture?
It just doesn't become a problem anymore,
Hmm.
because you realize the whole construct wasn't even real. So, like, I'll give examples because I know sometimes this sounds very Socratic and philosophical, right?
Sounds great.
Um, like, here's an example I give is, number one is, we need to understand that what your brain is very easily fooled into what it thinks is real. Like, one way I like to illustrate that is, I ask the question, have you ever been in a dream? And when you're in the dream, it felt real. Yes.
Mhm.
Which is proof right there. How it makes you question then, well, if your brain is that easily fooled into reality, what if whatever you think your current reality is wasn't real? And are we willing to question that? This is a very, like, Matrix-esque type of
It
question,
is. I
right?
was going to go, we're in the
Yeah,
matrix. All of a
exactly.
sudden.
That's exactly what it is. It's this process
Mhm.
of learning how to get out of the matrix and see what's real and what's not real. So how do I explain this? Is my daughter, I'll use an example of my daughter. When she was around 3, I was noticing I have this strong tendency to get very upset at her when she's not listening. I would get
Mm.
very mad. And in the survival brain, as I'm learning this, I'm going, okay, my brain is thinking her not listening to me is causing me to be mad. That's what feels real to me. But then you're able to question reality going, once I learned all this stuff, I'm just like, no, 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 no. If it's a survival emotion, which is an emotion that just basically doesn't feel good, it has nothing to do with the experience. It has nothing to do with the person in front of you. They're not causing the anger, right? So I'm going, wait, hold on. Then I'm interpreting the experience of her not listening to me. And there's a meaning I'm giving it that makes me get mad about that meaning I'm giving it. So I'm sitting there going, what is that? And I had this breakthrough moment going, oh my God, I'm very sensitive about being perceived as a bad parent because I had a rough relationship with my dad. I had a lot of anger and resentment that I held against him for not being the father I wanted him to be. And I had this selfish crusade going, if I ever become a parent, I'm never going to be a bad dad like my dad. So it's, what's the meaning I'm giving in the moment when my daughter's not listening to me? My brain's going, hey, you're being a bad dad, just like your dad. So I react now in anger.
And you're reacting to the pain that was actually implanted in the past.
I'm reacting to my pain from my past, and it has nothing to do with my daughter. And the way I react to that pain to try to make myself feel better is I try to control and I fight. It's called a fight, flight, freeze response, right? A fight response is anger and trying to control her and yelling at her. And all I'm doing to the poor girl is scaring the crap out of her. And the very thing I want to do with her, which is connect with her, I can't do it because when you're in survival, your empathy's turned off. Does that make sense? Like
it totally makes sense. Yeah.
So that's the before and after is, oh, the reality in the moment was, I thought because my daughter is not listening to me, it's justification for me to be mad. But the anger was always there. And it's just getting triggered because of my perception that I'm creating, my meaning I'm creating from this current experience when it had nothing to do with her not listening to me, which is she's just being a 3-year-old girl.
There you go. And so from your executive brain, that would be it. It was, she's just being a 3-year-old girl.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm also speaking for the parents in the room.
Yeah.
There go. And we want our children to listen to us because we have the best intentions at heart. Many times it's to have them grow up smart and taking care of themselves. Absolutely. And able-bodied. So are there any secrets to being with those triggers inside of ourselves in the moment so we can activate our executive brain?
Absolutely. So name of the game is awareness. That's the first and foremost. We need to be able to see it. If you can't see it, you can't change anything about it, right? The example I always give is if you have a piece of broccoli stuck between your teeth, how do you have the power to remove it until it comes into your awareness, whether it's someone pointing it out to you or you see it in the mirror, right?
Right.
So it really has to be about awareness. So that's why I teach about, well, what does survival state actually look like? In a life-threatening scenario, it's very straightforward. If a tiger's about to eat you, it's called a fight, flight, freeze response, right? I'm sure we've heard that phrase in school and stuff. Fight is very straightforward in a life-threatening scenario. You might try to pick up a weapon and defend yourself and fight the animal. Flight is you run for your life, right? You run away from the threat. And freeze is you actually play dead. You pretend to be dead because opossums are famous for doing this because their predators like their food alive, right? So if you're playing dead, then the threat will go away. So it's the same reaction in emotional survival. When we're surviving from these emotions we don't like feeling, it just looks different. And we have to be able to see it. So number one, what does fight look like? The more straightforward one is, someone says something hurtful to you and you get into an argument and you fight. It's an attack and defend conversation. Right. So yeah, someone hurts you, you react and fight. Another straightforward one is you might see someone with road rage on the highway because you got cut off and now you're flipped your lid and you're reacting by trying to cut the other person off despite how dangerous you're driving. So that's a fight response. Where a fight gets even deeper that some people don't even become aware of is overworking, perfectionism. That's our way of fighting from a fear that we're carrying, the fear of not being enough, not being good enough, not being smart enough, not being beautiful enough, whatever that is. So we fight to get there. So this is where people have reactions to people please and they don't hold their boundaries.
Oh, wow. There's a big 180, right? Because we can easily see the fight that is an external fight that requires force. Yes. Yet you've jumped us into the understanding of the fight that we have internally with ourselves and the habits and the behaviors that we can take on that are signs of that internal fight. One you've mentioned so far is overworking or having an addiction to becoming a workaholic. Right. The other one is not having boundaries. Let's dive into that. The people pleasing, as I would not have likened that to a fight response. It's very interesting.
Yes, because if I'm in people pleasing mode, the construct of my brain is there must exist some sort of reality, false reality, such as I'm not enough, I'm not
Mhm.
loved, I'm not supported. So therefore, I need to fight my way to become loved, become supported. And part of that is people pleasing. Maybe if I do enough things for you, I will one day feel enough, right? This was a huge breakthrough for me where I realized I had this deep complex of not being enough to the point where it affects your relationships. I do all these things for my wife, hoping one day I will be enough.
Was that also possibly the basis of your degree program and becoming a medical professional?
Yes, part of the becoming a medical professional was the fight for money, right? And in the Asian culture, it's the fight for status, right? To be
Status,
perceived as
prestige.
someone. I was very
Mhm.
interested in music, things like that. I initially was considering becoming a music engineer, those people that record songs in the recording room and all that. But
Cool.
yes, part of that is the fight for status as well. The
Mhm.
fight for to be perceived a certain way, to be viewed a certain way by people, which is always just a reflection about yourself.
Right.
It's a reflection about how you view yourself. Why are you fighting? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And so you're asking a different level of question,
Yes,
right? What I'm hearing is in your awareness, your help of us becoming aware of these patterns is that we must become curious about our own
exactly.
behaviors and our own thinking.
Exactly. Because that fighting is the very thing that's cutting you off from those hidden powers,
Mhm.
the very thing that's keeping you stuck.
So thank you for that awareness of the different forms
Right.
of fighting that we can
Yes.
do externally or internally.
Right. And so that's the fight response.
Right.
And then there's flight.
Mhm.
Flight is
That's easy
things
for
like,
me. Like,
yeah,
I'm out of here.
I'm out of here, right? Sometimes it's literally just avoiding conflict. I'm out of
Mhm.
here. Another way of flight is procrastination. Because
Mhm.
procrastination always stems from some belief. What will happen if I do this now and I screw up?
Yeah. What if I fail?
What if I fail? Or I don't feel capable of doing this right now. I don't feel
Mhm.
like I'm good enough to do this right now. So we procrastinate as a self-soothing mechanism. Where flight gets pretty insidious and deep is when we start numbing ourselves from the feeling we don't like feeling. So some
With
people binge watch Netflix.
substances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some
I've
people
been there a
over,
couple
yeah.
times.
Some people overeat, right? Eat a tub of ice cream. Some people overindulge in substances,
Mhm.
alcohol, sex, drugs, to the point of
Mhm.
addiction. It's a numbing mechanism to try to get rid of the pain, run away from the pain. And I think what the key thing here is, like, when you're hearing this, you might go, "Ooh, I feel exposed." But this is less
Yeah.
about judgment. It's just everyone does it.
Yeah.
Everyone does this.
At
Everyone
some
has
level.
at some level, has their fleeing mechanisms and their numbing mechanisms, because sometimes it's a lot to bear, right?
Mhm.
So it's just an awareness thing. Oh, there's flight. And then there's freeze, which is, it plays out like inaction. One thing to think about is, like, imagine you get caught in a lie. Don't you freeze? It's like, if I play dead,
You
maybe the
stumble.
problem will go away. I'm just going to stay frozen.
Mhm.
And it's also happens when you're overwhelmed. We just stop taking action. So when you examine your life and look at it, the game is, can we become aware of how much fight, flight, freeze is around us, whether it's in ourselves or those around us? The moment you do that, now you're seeing you're stepping out of the matrix. You're starting to see, whoa, there is so much reactiveness all around us. People are reacting without thinking all the time.
Yeah. Mhm.
So that's how I start. That's the most important part, is having that awareness.
Beautiful. And once we have that awareness, because what I'm feeling inside myself is that it's a call for courage.
Exactly.
It's a call for an energy state of um it's not even I can do it, because I think there's a part of us, especially our wonderful audience here, that believes in ourselves. We know we can. It needs to turn into a must.
Yes.
It's like I must do this to really reach the life that's yearning or calling from inside, right?
Yes.
So it takes courage.
Absolutely.
It takes a lot, and I take myself to that decision point where you asked your wife, like, "Can I do this? Can I move? Can we move from New York to California?" Because it involved not just yourself. I mean, I can imagine if it's your single life and you're going to make these transitions, like, "Hey, it's easy. Let's just go do it and see what happens." You had responsibility as well, and so you summoned an amount of courage. Had you known that was within you, that courage?
It got to the point where it was gnawing at me so much. And I remember this was very specific. And I remember I was on a 9-hour stretch because it was a road trip. We spent 2 months just seeing the country before we moved to LA. It
Cool.
was like a once in a lifetime thing, right? We got
Oh,
to
that sounds like fun.
plan an itinerary, look at all the places we wanted to look at. And I remember the stress is just melting away because New York City culture is very, hustle, bustle, busy.
Yeah.
Being miserable is the norm. People are proud of being busy and miserable. Uh, so I remember one time I was on a trip on a stretch. It was like a 9-hour drive, and there's just something really therapeutic about it. And I say, like, I don't like to say the phrase like I heard like a higher power, like God speaking to me, like, because sometimes what if it's in your own head? But what I do know is I definitely felt it. It was this feeling of communication of, call it what you want. Some people call it God, the universe, where it was communicating with me, for the first time, you're giving me something to work with. I can work with this. You made a decision. Because all this time you've been complaining about what you want me to change, the universe to change for you.
Right.
But you have to meet me halfway. Like, you have to meet me here. Like, you can't just expect me to go to you. I can't go to you when you're suffering, because that defies the definition of who the universe or God is, right?
Right.
So that's when I realized it's like, oh, this makes sense. You have to make a decision. And sometimes it's going to feel uncertain. Sometimes it's going to feel scary. And sometimes things are not going to happen the way you want it. Because, yeah, I did the filmmaking thing. I ran out of money. But then it's the very thing that helped me really tune into your intuition. Like, you're getting pulled towards a direction because, you know what? I had to make a bigger sacrifice later on. I ended up going back to pharmacy after filmmaking, became a supervisor. I was managing 6 major hospitals in LA County, over 250 plus clinics. And by the way, I got a supervisor position with no supervisor experience because they liked my entrepreneurial spirit. I got chosen over someone that had like many more years of experience specifically in that role, in that department. And I got the job. And fast forward, I had this opportunity to get trained directly by a multi-million-dollar business owner by working for his company and learning all the stuff he knows about business. But here I am making well into the 6 figures as a pharmacy supervisor now. I had 2 kids. There's more at stake.
Yes.
And there's this opportunity coming up where it's less than a third of my salary that I'm being offered, right, to work full time. And I'm talking to my wife about it. And we're sitting there looking at the opportunity going, when else am I going to get this value of training, even though the salary is a lot less? And, but I remember I was so drawn to it because, like, when else can you take this opportunity? And you intuitively move forward.
Yes.
And the rest is history, right? Because a lot's happened since then, right? My own business took off, like a bunch of stuff happened, right? Or like
Beautiful.
synchronicities, coincidences, opportunities. Here I am standing in front of you today because of it.
And I love this. A quote came through as you were sharing that story. If not now, when?
Exactly.
If not now, when? And in my own personal experience, I know that whenever we have an open door ahead of us and we know on the other side is another piece of our destiny and we hesitate or we wait, boy, is that some of the biggest pain. Because that
100%.
opportunity doesn't present itself again in the same shape, fashion, or timing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like there's a lot of poetic language around this, right? Like, you just step forward into the unknown and the universe will take care. It's so true. It's really true. But what's exciting is the science shows proof of it too.
I love this. And I
That's
love that
what's
you're
so
a science
exciting.
guy.
Yeah. I always used to, I'll be honest, like, I used to think this was like woo-woo BS.
Yeah.
But then the moment I explored from the scientific angle, it brought me into being a believer in the quote unquote the woo-woo BS, right?
That is so cool.
And everything just merges together. And that's kind of what shifted my life around. And now I just follow the direction. It's much more I was never an intuitive guy. I was very logical, plan out everything ahead of time to every minute. It changed me too, right?
Yeah. You've developed new muscles.
Exactly.
Definitely. This is awesome. And so what do your kids think of Dad now? How old are your children?
I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What do they think Dad does? This always fascinates me.
That's a great question. I try to teach them stuff, but I don't think they understand what Dad does, right?
No.
Because like I try to teach them what, like, some of the what stuff is, right? Like, one of the things I catch myself saying, which I can go into later, but like, it's like one of the things I catch myself saying now is I'm trying to say, I don't say you make me so mad. You're making me mad right now. Instead,
Right.
I have to switch that to I'm feeling so mad, because that's what ownership is, to be in an executive state, right? Because
Completely.
she's not, because yeah, that's a whole other
Mhm.
bag of worms to open up. But I try to show her like, hey, you're not the cause of anyone else's emotions ever, ever. Because the moment she believes that, and she's afraid of making someone mad,
That gives
right?
them unnecessary power over something that isn't true anyway.
Correct. And then now she might end up with an unethical boss that overworks
Mhm.
her, and she won't hold her boundaries because she's afraid of making people mad.
Right.
So I try to teach her, you are never the cause of someone else's emotion. So I try to teach her little things like that. My son, he's still 3, so he's just still, I'm like, what? But my
He's
daughter is
three.
actually starting to get interested in like meditation. She's like, she watches me meditate sometimes. She's like, I want to meditate. Can you teach me how to meditate? So I try to, I try to set that stuff up and provide that environment for them. But otherwise, it's actually typical parent life.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
still get
Typical parent
triggered. I still get upset. I still get impatient, and they still beg me for toys,
life.
and
There you go.
all
Hey,
that stuff.
Dad.
Yes.
You're still
Yeah.
dad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It reminds me of this time I was meditating. I went to a bedroom in our house, which was upstairs. And so the kids knew that that was mom's meditation room, AKA our guest bedroom. Right.
Yeah.
And I had this meditation Zafu pillow, and I was there, and I would be in meditation typically from 5 to 6 a.m. When the children weren't awake yet and things weren't stirring in the house. And so I'm in meditation, and I'm, deep in my samadhi response, and I can feel another energy in front of me.
Yep. Yep.
And I'm like, okay, I got to come back out of it. The blissful state of where I am. And I open my eyes slowly, and there's Maddie right in front of me. Like our noses are almost touching. And she says, "Are you done yet?"
Yeah.
She's like 5. She's like, "Are you done yet?" And I went, "Yes, I am now."
Yeah. That has happened to me multiple times. Yeah. Like they're opening the door and it's like, daddy, like I want this, I want that.
Right. I was in the living room. I was doing yoga. Right. And so I don't expect my kids to do yoga with me, but Maddie, this one morning, I think she was about 7. She's like, "I'm going to do yoga with mom." I'm like, "Cool." So she got her own yoga mat out, and she's doing it. And we're watching a thing on TV, following it. And we're doing table position, and we're there, and plank, we're in plank. And she turns to me and she goes, "Mom, this hurts."
Yeah.
And I said, "Yes, if you think about it that way." And she goes, "I'm done with this. I'm not doing it anymore." But it's so great because kids, they say what they feel, and they're like in the moment. And I was
Yeah.
thinking, this is beautiful. This is a great yoga experience also.
Our children
Right.
are open books.
They are. Do you find that you've noticed your children in their executive states?
Their natural state is executive state, right? They're
Ah.
playful, they're curious, they're wired. They're wired that way. We
Mm.
unlearn it as we grow up. Like one way I like to explain it is this: like, think about at 3 years old, what's that most annoying question that your child asks you all the time, right? Is why?
Why?
Why? Why?
Why?
Why? Why?
Why?
Why?
Why?
Why? Why?
Why?
Why? Why? But something caught my attention, and it's really interesting, because if you think about it, the question why has nothing to do with your survival. You see what I'm saying? Like,
It's true.
you don't see
It's becoming.
squirrels, or right, like you don't see squirrels or deer sitting there going, questioning their existence, going why. But why is it that as a child that's innately wired in you to ask why, when it has nothing to do with your survival? Because the rest of the world is focused on how and what do I do to make sure I don't die,
Hmm?
how do I do it, but never asks why. So the value I got of that was, oh, okay, we're innately wired for meaning, we're innately wired for purpose, but then we unlearn it, because as we become adults, we become much more practical and logical,
Yeah.
right? We
Darn it.
focus on what and how do I survive. And most people these days, I think the age is getting younger and younger, where they come to a point they realize, and they're starting to ask why again. It's like, I'm surviving now, I got the nice stable job and the nice benefits, and I'm going, why? Now they're going back to why. What's the meaning of all this? Why am I here? And I think children are just such great teachers, because the way I view it now, they're always a mirror. Whenever I'm finding myself frustrated, whenever I'm finding myself impatient, I know for a fact with the work that I do now, it's because there's a part of me that I'm impatient with.
I
I'm
love it.
impatient with the 5-year-old Eugene that took a while to understand something. I'm
Mm-hmm.
frustrated with the 10-year-old Eugene that felt like he couldn't fit in. And I want to
Awesome.
get rid of him. I don't like him. And that's who I'm surviving from. Does that make sense? It's the
It
war
does.
within yourself. We fight,
Yeah.
flight, freeze from ourselves.
Yeah. And so you're helping me understand that curiosity and asking those questions and returning to that childlike state, which is actually in the Bible. It says, like, lest ye see through the eyes of a child, like it's the child wonderment that brings us to that next level of ourselves.
Correct.
Right. And we're all little kids inside.
We all are.
Yeah.
And a lot of us
Cool.
are wounded kids inside.
We
That's what
are.
it comes down to. Yeah.
Yeah. And embrace that with that empathy. You said to have empathy for ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's you're bringing up such an important point. That's really what it is. Bottom line is improving this relationship with yourself. That's what it comes down to. Like, if that's the secret that I'm going to share of what I do with people, it's helping them have better relationships with themselves. Because that's everything. Like, everything leads to this road, 100%.
I love it. So are there any exercises that you do or activities that you do for your own life to empower that empathetic side and return to that wonder-like state for yourself daily?
Absolutely. So I have it in two categories. So there's short-term work, which is when you're in the moment, when you're becoming aware that you're in survival in the moment. And then there's long-term work, because the reality is our brain does it on autopilot, meaning your brain keeps doing it without you telling it to go into survival, because of all of these memories that you carry based on your unique personal life experiences, right? So it becomes on autopilot. That's why, if you're walking down the stairs, you're not going, I need to put my left foot front, my right. It just does it by itself. The same applies to your beliefs, your perspectives, etc. Right? So short-term wise, I can mention two today. The two easy ones is, number one is label your emotions. Make it just a consistent practice. So this is scientifically proven. I'll give an example. They did this research at UCLA where they would have brain scans tied to your head, and they would show you pictures of these people's faces with the survival emotion, which a survival emotion is basically just any emotion that doesn't feel good, right? Stress, anxiety, depression. So they would show these pictures. As soon as they show you the picture, the survival brain immediately started turning on in the brain scans, your survival
Wow.
brain. So but what was really interesting is the moment that the researcher would ask the participant, can you tell me what emotion you're seeing in this photo? And they'd be like, oh, that's easy. That's fear. That's frustration. That's anxiety. The moment you labeled it, the survival brain turned off and the executive brain turned on. Why is that?
Wow.
To label emotion, you need to think. When you're in survival, you cannot think. You're literally not thinking, because if you're thinking, you might die. That's what the brain thinks, right? If a tiger's in front of you and you
It
start
takes
thinking.
too much time to think.
Exactly. So when we make it a habit to label our emotions, whether it's out loud or just even in your own minds, you're actually calling on your executive brain to turn on so that you can emotionally regulate yourself. So what's important is, what it sounds like is, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling frustrated. And a clinical psychologist buddy of mine gave me a really important distinction. He's like, there's a subtle yet important difference between I am sad and I feel sad.
Really?
That's where you need to pay attention to when you're describing the language, because I am sad presumes that is your identity. Just like I am Eugene, I am sad. But when it's your identity, you're going to continually react to the identity that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
But the
That's an
reality is
interesting
feelings.
nuance.
Yeah, exactly. But the feelings come and go. How do we know this? Sometimes you feel sad, sometimes you feel happy, right?
Yeah.
Feelings come and go. It is not who you are. So when you are saying I'm feeling sad, you're acknowledging the fact that you are not your emotions.
Mhm.
It is a feeling that comes and goes. So when you do that, you allow yourself to separate from it. Does that make sense?
Totally does.
So just
I know
making
you're
it a
going to
daily
share a
practice.
second one too.
Yeah.
There's something that I've noticed that people do, and I've noticed it in myself, and I'm working to break the habit, is that whenever we ask, how are you feeling? People say what they're thinking as opposed to what they're feeling, or they say, I feel like, instead of feeling, or they're saying, this is what I think. Have you noticed that also in language, that we have not been trained on how to tap into our feelings and own
Yeah.
them?
People are used to their logical brain and not as much their emotional brains, which is why it catches people off guard when you're saying, how are you feeling? But
Mhm.
that's a common question I ask. It's just like, how are you feeling? Right? Because I don't want this to just be an intellectual. You need to be able to feel this too, right? The reality, the real reality. Yes, I agree. And it is a defense mechanism. It's a survival tactic. You see what I'm saying? Like, to
No,
be
we don't feel
vulnerable.
safe.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't feel safe to be vulnerable and open with each other. So that's where it's a survival tactic. It's a defense mechanism, to be able to communicate. And there's there's a lot of reasons for this, right? Uh, in masculine culture, it's because we're told to man up and be
Mhm.
tough, right?
Mhm.
Don't show your emotions, stop crying, stop being
Man,
such a
don't
girl.
cry. Yeah.
So then our emotional brains, which is a whole half of your brain, by the way, right? Your right hemisphere is being told, hey, there's no place for you here. We don't want you. It feels rejected. So what happens is our logical brain overcompensates for the emotional brain. So this is why in the typical heterosexual stereotypical relationship, girl is trying to share her feelings, be seen, felt, and heard, but the guy is just busy trying to fix the problem with their logic.
Mhm.
Have you done this? Have you done that? Well, why don't you do it this way? Why don't you? And the girl's like, can you just shut up and just listen to me?
I'm just telling you how I feel.
So our
Yeah.
logic overcompensates as a defense mechanism, if that makes sense. And then that's why people use their intellect to avoid their feelings. They try to solve their way by thinking their way and figuring it out. They go into thinking and doing mode and not sensing and feeling mode. And that's also culture. You don't get paid for what you feel, right? You get paid for what you know. So it's just a habit that's created in a lot of us. We think our logical brain should be the dominant part of our brain when both halves are meant to work in conjunction and have balance. We're
Right.
meant to have both the thinking and doing and the sensing and feeling together.
And you were mentioning, thank you for that. You were mentioning earlier that people, and maybe I picked this up in the conversation, that they tend to have easier labels or identification for those emotions that are stressful or painful. Do they also have an easy access to emotions or a larger vocabulary to emotions that are on the joy side of the
Yeah.
spectrum?
Yeah, one of the things that's talked a lot about in the coaching space is
Mhm.
increasing your emotional vocabulary, right?
Yes.
I think if you Google the emotional wheel, there's like a bunch
There's
of
an
different
emotional
versions,
wheel. Oh my God, I have that.
right?
I give it to my clients. It's like
Exactly.
hundreds of words for emotion.
That's the science in action. You
Mhm,
create the vocabulary so you can label your emotions. You
mhm.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's critical to be able to label your emotions because you're actually regulating your emotions when you're
Mhm.
labeling them.
That's beautiful. And that was the first thing that you said. And I think I interrupted and took us into a different pathway. You
No,
said
you're
that
good.
there were two things. One was labeling your emotions and understanding how to articulate those. What would be another hack? I know you're doing
Yeah,
destinyhacks.co.
yeah, absolutely.
Another hack that you use on a regular basis to get yourself into that executive mind.
Yeah, it's really the breath. It's
Mm.
cliche, it's talked about a lot, but I just like to explain the science to help fortify people to be more willing to do breathing exercises, right? It's
Please.
because at the bottom of your lungs and your diaphragm, there's something called your parasympathetic nerves, right? When these nerves are activated, it gets your body into an executive state because your body has reactions too, right? So if you're in front of a tiger that's about to eat you, think about what's happening in your body. Your heart's overworking, overpumping, your lungs are, breathing very rapidly, try to get as much oxygen in your body to survive from the threat. Blood goes away from your gut, which is why a lot of people who are stressed out all the time and they're in survival, they have digestion issues, by the way, right? And
Mhm.
they go to the doctor and the doctor's saying the labs are fine, but no, why am I still experiencing all these digestion issues? And they say it's stress, which is very true. So when you take these deep breaths, it's like consciously telling your body, hey, you're not about to be murdered right now. You can
Mhm.
calm down and stop wasting energy so that you
Yeah.
can conserve the energy and rest and digest. So it's why it's so important to take breaths when we're feeling stressed because your body actually thinks it's about to die. And you need to consciously regulate it and tell your body, hey, we're okay. We're not about to die. And then it gets your critical thinking skills turned back on, your problem solving skills turned back on. So breathing, the two types I recommend is, box breathing, which is 5-second inhale, 5-second holding it, and then 5-second exhale, nice and slow. The second type of breathing is a deep inhale. You inhale again when you take that deep inhale and slow exhale. They actually had live scans when people did this breath. You see the body just calm down.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
And, we know these things and we forget.
exactly.
That's awesome. So, labeling our emotions and understanding what those are, increasing our emotional vocabulary, not only on the negative emotions, but definitely on the positive emotions, and reaching for that empathy, that empathetic state, and then doing purposeful conscious breathing, because that relaxes the nerves that are hitting that parasympathetic response, so that we can also know the truth is we are safe. Now, Dr. Eugene, if they are in front of a lion, tiger, or anything like that, of course
You
that
need
fight
it.
or flight's going to work on its own.
Yes, like you need that. Yeah, but
Yeah.
any other time in your life, majority of the time, you do not need it, but we're in it. That's the main thing. And the big problem is we're in it on autopilot
Mm.
because that's the
Unconsciously.
experience. Exactly. That's the experience most people get stuck. Is like, I know these things are good for me. I've tried these things. People tell me to meditate. People tell me to practice gratitude. Yet why is it that I'm not getting the result that I'm looking for? That's when it's important to become aware of the long-term solution, which is, hey, because of your unique life experiences, your brain is doing this without you telling it to, because it's built the programming. So there's a saying, there's research that shows basically by the time you're about 35 years old, 90 to 95% of the brain becomes subconscious, meaning it's on autopilot.
My goodness.
You know, we think 70,000 thoughts a day, 90 to 95% of those thoughts are the same thoughts every day. And a majority of those thoughts are some form of negative thought about yourself. So think about what state that triggers you to go into: survival or executive survival.
Mhm.
So, and if all of this is programming, the question becomes, can you develop the skills to be able to reprogram? And that's why the science is exciting, because yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
And
Even after 35.
even after. Yeah, we have proof that your brain has the ability to rewire till your dying breath. It's called neuroplasticity.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We could probably talk for a whole hour on
Oh
just
yeah,
that,
there's
right?
multiple rabbit holes here that we can go down. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for being our guest today on Light Your Life. And I want to make sure that we all make note of how we can follow you, find you, and utilize your services. And that is your best web address is www.destinyhacks.co. And then you have your podcast, which is neurohackingpodcast.com. And you do have a free training for us on how to activate our own brain's superpowers. And that is at your website. And that's easy. I would have to imagine you just log in
Yep.
and give information. You're going to give us that wonderful download today.
Exactly.
Can't wait. This is going to be so much fun. I love learning more about myself so I can become a better human for myself and for the people around me. And thank you for being part of that instrument for
Thank you so
ourselves.
much for having me. Yeah.
Thank you. And we're here for you in any way. If there's anything new that you have, just come back to Light Your Life and we'll share it with our audiences.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Eugene Choi.